Okay, 1 minute. Good luck, darling.
But... Applejack barely managed to stammer as she was shoved onto the darkened stage. Even with the lights down, the blonde filly could see that the hall was practically packed with ponies. She was shaking in her hooves, and the murmur of the room was practically a roar in her ears. She looked off to the side once more, not certain if it had been Marmalade or Rarity that had shoved her out there. They were giving her hopeful and supportive gazes. "Remember," Rarity whispered, "your speech." She could only gulp as she turned back towards the stage. There was a podium right in the center, and she dutifully, though reluctantly, trotted up to it. As soon as she had put her forehooves on its desk, a bright spotlight flared to life, bathing the orange earth pony in its brilliant glare, causing her pearls and dress to glisten. Out in the audience, there was a bout of cheering, as well as a few whistles of appreciation. Off to her side, she thought she heard Rarity sighing in contentment. "Greetings!" she managed to squeeze out. There was another wave of cheers, accompanied by hoof stomps and claps. "I'm here in place of Miss Jupiter Jams, who was unable to attend this year's Equestrian and Agricultural Conference and Exhibition." Her heart eased its pounding in her head as she tuned the crowd out, letting her own words fill her ears. "Mr. Marmalade has asked that I open up our talk today instead, so let me tell you a bit about myself. My name is Applejack. I run a farm, not unlike many of you here today." She got a few cheers of support at that, and at least 3 right-ons. "Many of you have heard of Sweet Apple Acres. Why, I believe some of you have even been to my stall today, haven't you?" A good portion of the crowd erupted in yet another cheer, louder than the last. This brought a smile to her face, as her nerves finally managed to calm down. With the calm, however, came a loosening of discipline. She felt her tongue wanting to move in treacherous ways, her lips to make sound not fit for noble halls. She smacked herself dryly as she waited for the cheer to subside. A glass of water would be heavenly right about now. I'm glad you enjoyed them," she continued, once she could hear herself think again, trained voice still in place. "It really warms my heart to see that. The Apple family has been in the apple business for generations, and you can find apples grown by us in almost every corner of Equestria. Sweet Apple Acres in particular is based right out of Ponyville, where we keep some of our best, most cherished family traditions alive." She closed her eyes as she thought back to the farm. "For years we put the same thing on our apples that our forefathers did before us. Tender, loving care, good and responsible practices, and lots of down-to-earth, hard, honest work." She opened her eyes. She looked out at the crowd. She then looked back down at her dress. A farmer pony, dressed up as a frou-frou pony, talking like a frou-frou pony, to a bunch of other frou-frou ponies at a farmer's convention. Her eye twitched. This was stupid. This was more than just stupid. This just wasn't right. Down in the audience, a dusty gray filly eeped as she felt a tingle go over her body. This was quickly followed by an all-body jitter as she began to vibrate in place. "Sissy pie!" she stuttered, voice vibrating as she did. "So something's about to happen!" Inky Pie watched her sister's antics as her eyes widened. "Are you sure, Maggie? I haven't felt anything yet." In Ponyville, inside Sugar Cube Corner, the bakery's #1 employee was in the process of handing a tray of meringue cookies over to an eager purple dragon, when the treats suddenly vibrated off their platter. Green eyes widened in panic as the Earth Pony began to shudder in place. "Pinky!" Spike yelped. "What's going on? Is something going to happen? Is it twilight?" "I don't know," the pink filly stammered, but I can tell it's not twilight." "Who, then?" the dragon panicked. "Rarity? Rainbow Dash? Or Fluttershy? Did Fluttershy explode?" "Applejack!" At a rock farm, somewhere between Ponyville and Cloudsdale, an elderly Earth Pony couple leaned back in their rocking chairs, sighing in relief at the peace and quiet they now had all to themselves. The tall brown stallion closed his eyes, hat drooping over his face.
"You know, I may not be an up-to-date pony, but I have to thank today's world for giving the kids a distraction."
"I'll say," the gray mare replied, her hooves busy in darning a sock. "Inky and Maggie are probably having themselves a blast." There was a chuckle.
"They've always had a blast, ever since Pinky got her cutie mark. Sometimes I wonder if they'll really stay, or if they'll follow their sister and move to Ponyville."
"We should visit Pinky," Mother Pie stated, looking evenly over her spectacles. Ponyville's not a bad place, you know. I've been there. We could always drop in on the apple farm, see if the old tart Smith's still hanging. Paused her rocking and her eyes widened. Papa Pie kept his eyes evenly on her, even when her tail began twitching, followed by her backside, proceeding up her spine, towards her forehooves, and ending at her head as she shimmied in an impromptu seizure.
Who's it this time?
He asked, only mildly curious. Can't tell, she started, her own voice remaining calm and even as she shook. But they're in Oklahoma City. Oh, wait, Pinky stated. She felt the tingling herself. Then, before she knew it, she was imitating her vibrating pose. There it goes! Why are you always so late? Maggie questioned her sister, barely managing to raise an eyebrow through her shaking. Meanwhile, Applejack looked down, her mind apparently made up. She looked over to the side and caught Rarity's eyes. She gave the unicorn a sad look as she said in perfect Manehattenite, I'm sorry, Sugar Cube. And then she turned back to the crowd. But I can't keep this haystacking act up anymore. There was a ripple of amazement that coursed through the crowd. The white filly's eyes shrank in panic. Mr. Marmalade kept his silence as he watched the apple bucker proceed to rant. I got invited out here to this exhibition all because I had a fancy voice. I'm gonna tell y'all right now that voice tain't me. This is me. Y'all want to know how the apple family gets our apples so good? Let me tell you. Me and my brother Macintosh go out there and we buck those trees ourselves. 'Tain't no fancy apple baron. I like to get my hooves dirty. I'm a farmer, and this con's supposed to be for farmers. So how come I gotta break out my Manehattenite frou-frou talk? I tried to be sophisticated once a long time ago. It wasn't me then, and it sure tain't me now. So go on. Y'all know now that I tain't fancy, frou-frou, high class, or what have you. And I don't want to be no more. Throw me out. Toss me in the mud for all I care. Just so long as I can stop lying and be true and sound like myself. She panted, her frustrations now fully vented, the hall still echoing with her words. The farmer allowed her green eyes to travel over the hushed occupants of the room. She then allowed herself another glance over to Rarity, who appeared to be in the midst of a heart attack. The expression on Marmalade's face still remained unreadable. Well, it's were a good run, she thought to herself. I won't be sticking around for the other 2 days, but that's all right. I made enough today to do some fixing up at the farm. If I never get invited anywhere again, I think I'll be able to live. Sorry about that, Rarity, but I'm done living a lie. The orange mare stood there in silence, the lone spotlight still beating down on her. She awaited the audience's reaction. She didn't have to wait very long. As one, each and every pony in the room let out a single word. Hoo-wee! Followed by someone in the back yelling out,
About darn time someone said it.
And then the murmur came rolling back, but this time with a different flavor to its melody. Rarity's expression shifted from panic to outright shock as she noticed that each and every single equine in the room had suddenly lost any traces of the cultured upbringing in their voices. The conversation of the hall was dominated with a thick, syrupy drawl of a southern accent. Ponies were sighing with relief, hugging each other, laughing and bucking with joy as the earlier tension completely dissolved away, leaving behind an air of gratitude as they all relaxed, letting their natural speech and voices shine through. Applejack quite obviously had not expected this outcome either. She remained rooted to her spot behind the pedestal, her eyes wide and unbelieving, jaw slack and hanging open. She barely registered the approach of 2 ponies by her right side. Applejack? She slowly turned her head. Her friend stood there beside her, the unicorn's face a mixture of emotions, warring for domination. Shock, pride, and sorrow? Her heart weighed heavy at her own chest as she took it in. That was beautiful, Applejack, Rarity began, stretching a hoof out and placing it on the farmer's shoulder. I'm sorry. I had no idea. She turned to look back at the crowd, hee-haws and whoops rising from the surface every now and again. I really had no idea. She looked back. How can I ever make it up to you? Unbidden tears began to spring from the corners of the orange one's eyes. She raised her hooves up and unclasped the pearl necklace that had felt so much like a burden. As she handed them back to Rarity, she brought her hooves back to her mane and tugged at the bouffant. It gave way. Blonde strands cascading down her back, she gave a shake of her head, the weight of the world off her shoulders. She looked back at the white mare, head turned downwards, tears still flowing. I want my hat back.